Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Renza Shibilia. I am the manager of Type 1 Diabetes and Communities at Diabetes Australia. And welcome to everybody for our Facebook Live chat all about hypoglycemia. This is part of our Lowdown 2020 campaign. You may have seen it all over social media. We have a hashtag that is Hypos Happen. And tonight we'll be speaking with a variety of people living with diabetes who just happen to have hypos. And we're going to hear some stories about what that feels like, what that means to us. But more than just this is what a hypo is, we're going to be talking about how hypos impact our well-being, our mental health, because as we know with diabetes, things are never, ever just about our numbers. So I'm joined first. So we will, as I said, we've got a wonderful rotating sort of roster of people with diabetes from across Australia. And we're going to start off today. We've got in the first session, we've got Cheryl Steele, Jack Fitzpatrick and Georgie Peters. And I'm going to throw to each of you one at a time and ask you to tell us a very quick bit about you, and then we'll start asking some questions. So Cheryl, let's start with you just because you're the first person on my screen there. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Thanks, Renza.
Good. Now, if anybody doesn't know who you are, and I wonder if that's possible in Australia, but could you please tell us who you are and your connection to diabetes?
Certainly. Well, I'm Cheryl. I live with type 1 diabetes and have done for the past, I think it's about 35, 36 years now. Of my 3 children, 2 have type 1 diabetes and they're grown up now. And my granddaughter also has type 1 diabetes, so I'm sort of matriarch of a type 1 dynasty, and I work as a credentialed diabetes educator. So I guess you could say diabetes takes up quite a bit of my life.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sharing not only your own personal experience, but your professional knowledge as well, because I know that that well of knowledge seems to be quite endless, really, which is wonderful. Jack Fitzpatrick, welcome. It's nice to be chatting with you again. Tell us about you.
I was going to say, do you want Georgie to go first? Ladies first. I'm happy to.
No, Georgie's happy for me.
I'm still hypoing, so please go.
Right, very apt.
Yeah.
There, Georgie. Well prepped for this. It's good, giving us some content. Now, Jack Fitzpatrick, as you said, Renz. I'm an ex-AFL player. I spent 6 years playing at Melbourne and 8 years playing, and 2 years playing at Hawthorn. So I spent a total of 8 years in the AFL. I was diagnosed with diabetes 2 weeks before I turned 21. So that was type 1 diabetes. I am now an ambassador at Diabetes Victoria. Obviously, at the time, I didn't know a lot about diabetes, and I thought all the stereotypes about diabetes. It was something you get when you're a bit older, maybe you're a bit overweight, you don't eat overly well, those kinds of things. Maybe I ate too much sugar. That's what I thought. I didn't know a lot about type 1 diabetes at the time. So I had to retire from footy at the end of 2017 after sustaining my 9th concussion, which is quite a lot, quite obviously. But the one thing I was quite proud about was the fact that it was never my diabetes that stopped me from playing footy. I was able to manage it, quite well whilst I was playing, and I guess trying to showcase that, I'm just a normal Australian guy, and I was able to still chase my dreams or live my dream and chase my goals whilst living with type 1 diabetes. And if I can do it, then a lot of people out there can as well.
Thanks, Jack. And Georgie, who is really very committed to the cause and taking it very seriously because she is hypo while we're talking about hypos. So thank you for being so dedicated. Georgie Peters, you're an absolute gem. Thanks for joining us, and tell us all about you.
Thank you, Renza. I'm Georgie. I've been living with type 1 for nearly 11 years, which is nuts. I'm a diabetes advocate. I like to advocate, again, I'm a bit hypo, so if I slur, I swear it was like hypo. I haven't had a beer. I had one, but that doesn't. Yeah, Christmas party. So I've been living with 11 years. I advocate around diabetes and body image issues, eating disorders, mental health. I'm really passionate about that area of diabetes, and my day job is a high school French teacher. I'm just very passionate about this community and also really good at hypoing. So
you are. Well, yes, you get a gold star in hypo. So well done. Actually, saying there, that you haven't had a beer, we're actually going to talk about if we've ever been mistaken for being drunk or something else when we've actually been low. So that's just a bit of a tip for what we're going to talk about. But before we do that, let's just get a couple of housekeeping things out of the way. If you'd like more information about our Lowdown campaign, you just need to go to the lowdown.eu, and the wonderful Emily is going to be putting all of this information into the chat function in our Facebook, on our Facebook page. So you'll be able to see all of that. we're currently running a competition as well. And if you join, you're going into the draw to win a $250 Visa card voucher, which is a very good present for this time of the year, I would
How
imagine.
hypo do I have to be to win the competition?
It's not how low can you go.
Oh.
So let's just be really clear about that. That is not what this is about. We just are asking people to share their experiences of living with a hypo. We would love you to share it in one word, a picture or a video, whatever you'd like to do. All of the information will be put on our page. And the competition closes 11 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday the 17th. You need to use the hashtag HyposHappen to enter. Now, the way that these sorts of events, these sessions work the best is when we have as much participation from people who are watching. If you have any questions, please just pop them in the comments section of Facebook and we will make sure that we get to them if we can. If you have a question that you would like to ask, but you don't particularly want everybody to see that it's you asking, you can send a message to Diabetes Australia on Facebook and one of the team will share the question with me and we won't mention any names. So let's actually open with that. Now, Jack, last year, you actually did a great video for us. So we might even share that again somewhere. But and you spoke about being mistaken for being drunk when you're actually hypo. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how it made you feel, I guess, because we're really wanting to explore more than just the moment of the hypo, but how we were feeling about it as well.
Oh, many people would argue that I was drunk when I was playing footy, Renza, too. They would say I wasn't very good, but
no judgment, Jack. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just something I guess that can happen, and I know that at times it is a very similar feeling. And if I'm in a situation like George is now, and I've had maybe 2 or 3 beers, or I'm starting to feel a bit off, I go, geez, am I having a hypo? Am I, am I actually a little bit tipsy? It all sort of depends. I think I've been out before at a bar and been having a hypo and noticed it, and I've never really had too much of an issue with that previously because, as we know, when we're drinking, often we don't eat the healthiest foods and we can drink the sugary drink. So if anything, when I'm drinking, I normally go a bit higher than low. But this one night I was out at a bar in Richmond in Melbourne, and I could just tell straight away. I thought, no, this is much more than just being tipsy or drunk. So pretty much pushed my way to the front of the bar, which was quite rude, but I'm quite lucky that being 6'7", no one really wants to argue with me too much.
Yeah, have you?
No,
yeah, I think I've also just pushed to the front, being like, excuse me, dwarf, come through.
As you know, I think when we get in that hypo stage, I think we could take down a heavyweight boxer, to be honest. I don't think it would matter. And I just literally stood at the bar for about 45 minutes and I ordered about 4 lemonades and just sat there and sculled them. And that was pretty much the end of my night, because then by that stage, I've sort of been disconnected from my friendship group for a bit, and I'd obviously sobered up a lot as well. So, but all's well that ended well. I got home safely, which is always the main thing.
Yep, absolutely. Cheryl, I'm going to throw to you because I want to ask about, when I remember, I've had type 1 now for 22, nearly 22 years. And I do remember being told, hypos were very much about low blood sugar. You treated and then you got on with your day and you had to treat straight away and then that was it. But what I learned pretty quickly was that there's a lot more to it than that. Symptoms can vary. Sometimes there are no symptoms, all sorts of things. But for me, often the thing that was really difficult wasn't necessarily the dealing with the hypo, it was how I felt afterwards. I'd often have these feelings of what if that was a lot worse? What if I didn't pick up that hypo? All of that. Is that something, I'm going to ask you now, a health professional, question as a health professional, is that something you talk about with people with diabetes, and what sort of things do you say to them about that?
I think it's really important. Everybody who lives with diabetes, type 1 diabetes at least, is going to have a hypo at some stage. It's insulin will cause hypos, and insulin is our treatment. And I don't know anybody who has managed to survive very long living with type 1 diabetes and not having a hypo. And I think it's very normal also to think about the worst case scenario. If I had have been, how many people tell the story, like, what happens if I was isolated in a car in a snowstorm and I had no hypo treatment? We live in a country where it very rarely snows, but that's one of the things you think of. What happens if I get caught and I've got no hypo treatment? Will I really die? Will I just lapse into unconsciousness? Will I do something silly? And I think they're very real you know, insecurities that people who live with diabetes have. And, you know, I'm old enough and have been doing diabetes education for long enough. I remember when when people were first diagnosed, keep them in hospital and cause them to have a hypo, because we really thought that was necessary for them to know what it felt like. Now I'm embarrassed to say, gosh, that was barbaric. How dare we? But at one stage, that's what we thought was being good for people, letting them know what it felt like. So I think there is a lot of this stigma attached to having diabetes and having hypos.
Yeah.
And, you know, imagining the worst case scenario rather than, you know, yes, they are awful. And I think the very worst are nighttime hypos, where you wake up the next day and your brain just doesn't function properly. But I think we all have them, and it's natural to be frightened of the consequences.
Yep. Thanks, Cheryl. Hey, Georgie, somebody's actually commented on our Facebook. So would you mind just answering this firstly before I ask you a hypo question? Can you tell us what your Instagram account is?
Yes,
so
I replied to them in the comments. I tagged the Facebook page.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, but the Instagram for anyone watching is Bozzy, oh my gosh, still, 3.5. Body Posy Beaties. You can find it on Facebook and Instagram, and I've linked the Facebook in the chat.
Good. Yes, please, and do, absolutely. But can I ask you a question, or do you want me to come back to you?
No, go for it.
All right. Okay. My question is, I wanted to pick up on something Cheryl just said there, which was around the stigma associated with hypoglycemia. Is that something that you felt, and how does that feel, and how do you address that?
I feel it a lot at work. As a teacher, it's harder to treat hypos at work because you're not at a desk and you can't sort of take your time, and they often come at the worst possible times. And so it doesn't come from my colleagues, or sometimes it may come from the kids, but it's more so of I sort of feel like I should be better than this. Like, why haven't you controlled it? Why haven't you got it together? What did you do this time? And it's taken me a long time to sort of let myself be kind to myself. And it's not like I set out to have a hypo, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of the stigma I feel it's not from the people around me. Often people around me sort of overreact and they're like, oh God, like you're going to die. Like, here, have 10 juice boxes. I think it's more so if I go to a GP that's not well versed in it and they'll ask me, well, do you have hypos? And you're like, well, of course I have hypos. Like, I take insulin, like I'm going to have hypos. And then they'd be like, well, why? And it's like, well, so I have felt it more so in the healthcare system than in my day-to-day life. But I think the most important thing is to just be kind to yourself and realize that it's inevitable. They're going to happen at some point.
That's textbook versus the real world, isn't it? That
exactly.
You get. My best mate is a doctor. And he's very much, I talk to him about what I'm going through in my life, and I go, this is pretty cool. And he goes, yep, this is how it should be. I'm like, that's great, mate, when you're reading a textbook, but it's not when you're living 24/7 with diabetes. It's completely different.
Life.
Yeah. I always find that, 15 grams, wait 15 minutes, then check, then treat, all of that. And I kind of think, number one, when I'm low, I couldn't count to 15 if my life depended on it. I couldn't count out 15 grams of jelly beans. I couldn't measure 100 ml of juice. And also, when we're having one of I call them those kitchen hypos, you're just going to get in there and eat practically everything that you can, because if you do not get every bit of sugar into you right now, it's going to be a problem. That's the reality. Whereas, sometimes it's not always really like that in real life. But that's what I wanted to ask you, Jack, is what else have you found works if you're trying to explain to people what the difference between the reality of living with a hypo and having a hypo and what it is perhaps that people might think it is? How do you explain that?
I actually say, funnily enough, having retired from footy due to concussion, that the two feelings aren't dissimilar. They are very hard, both of them, because they are, and in a way, it's almost similar to people who have mental health issues in that, whether it be depression, anxiety, things like that, that no one else really understands what you're going through, and it is invisible. And unfortunately, I think we're getting to a point where, in all circumstances, whether it be hypos or mental health and things like that, we're getting to a point where people are certainly a lot more accepting and understanding. But there are certainly people out there who, come on, harden up. It can't be that bad. There's nothing wrong with you. You're making it up. All those kinds of things. So I think it's a bit of a mix of, I suppose, trying to help people understand, versus, as Georgie said, you sort of sometimes almost feel like you have to stick up for yourself. And then at times there's a bit of, I guess, not let down in yourself, but particularly if it's a meeting at work or whatever it might be, if you slip halfway, or if you're halfway into it and you slip into a hypo and you go, well, could I have been better prepared for this? But then you think about it and you go, well, I've got something really important at work. I've just, I've checked before I start the meeting and my sugars were perfect. So I can't help what's happened in the last 20 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever it might be. So I think sometimes Cheryl sort of touched on it as well. It's a battle of all those kinds of things. And again, looking at it from an AFL point of view, when I was playing, like all these guys I see a lot and they're very professional and professional athletes, but it was completely new to them as well. So anything from when I was pricking my fingers, halfway through a game and the guys are going, geez, what's happening here? To one day I'm sitting in the change rooms and, I've got my head in my hands and they're asking me, are you tired from a big training session or is there something wrong with you? Do we need to go and get you whatever it might be? And then, of course, at footy, it was always trying to stop everyone eating the jelly beans in my locker as well. So that was the biggest issue. But, I think it's a bit of a mixture, to be honest, Renz. I don't think there's one specific answer.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a comment here from Heather who says that she's newly diagnosed and still learning about hypos. And today she enjoyed too. Enjoyed is an interesting word to use there, but I understand. I feel people think that we do it on purpose. And I think that's actually a really interesting point. And I wonder, as a person who is always thinking about the language that we use around diabetes, I always find it interesting when I read avoid having hypos, as if it's something that we can simply and very easily just do. Cheryl, how is that something that frustrates you, or because I'm willing to bet that that's not the language that you're using?
Well, I hope not, but there is an expectation, I guess, that if you are well managed, that, you're never going to go high, you're never going to go low, because, remember that little scale that was probably in your literature you got given when you were diagnosed, where, the insulin was this end and the food was that end and your activity was in the middle, and it just all stayed like that, and you had no excuse for the seesaw to dip either way. And, I particularly as a mum speaking now, when I had kids at school, that accusation almost by the teacher that your child had a hypo on purpose because they didn't want to sit in on that lesson, or they were attention seeking, or, it's just very, very frustrating because already when you have a hypo, you don't feel well. And then when you have somebody accusing you of making yourself sick, for what reason? To eat a jelly bean? I mean, yay. Or to have a juice box? Well, my life depends on that. It just doesn't make sense. Why would you do that to yourself? And, I think we all have to learn to live with the fact that they are going to happen. They're not on purpose. And yes, sometimes with a bit of planning, we might have avoided the odd one here or there. But who wants to live a life that is so planned that nothing out of the ordinary ever happens?
Actually, we did a Facebook Live Q&A with James Spate last week. James Spate is the Foundation Director of the Australian Centre for Behavioural Research in Diabetes, and we were talking about this. And I said, I've gotten to the point now, I never knew how to answer this, but if I'd had a hypo, people would say to me, what did you do? As if it was, this deliberate, willful action that I had taken. And now I just say, I have diabetes, because that's often the answer. The answer is I have diabetes. It sometimes means that I have hypos. But Georgie, have you got, I'm conscious that we need to bring in other people. So I'm going to ask you, do you have any tips for people who are, I guess, feeling, I don't know, nervous or anxious or worried about what their friends or work colleagues or family might think about them because of having hypos?
I found with my work colleagues, talking to them has been really great. When I was first diagnosed, I kind of tried to hide it and I pushed through it, which hasn't worked. So now my work colleagues call it sweaty ghosting. They might walk past my classroom and they look pale and sweaty and weird. So talking to people, as scary as it is, has been really helpful. Doesn't have to be everyone, just a couple of good friends at work have been like, hey, if this happens, I need this. And, phrasing it, and also, not playing it up, but also not playing it down. Like, I'm not going to die, but also I can't stay on the floor for the next half hour. Like, I do need to sit down and kind of like get it up. So that's probably my biggest tip, is to talk to people. And also, I would also recommend having a bit of a hypo debrief if you're lucky enough to have anyone else with diabetes in your life, because I find that I would always feel really guilty about mine, or like I wasn't good enough. And then sharing stories with other people with type 1 was just, or any type of diabetes that have hypos, was really fantastic, because you're like, okay, I'm not the only one. We've all had hypos, you know, in the middle of a work meeting, or in the middle of a, you know, a production or something like that. So yeah, talking to other people and, you know, talking with your colleagues has been really great.
And
Just support for the win.
Sorry,
always.
yeah, just to quickly add on that, I think I find that when you talk to people about diabetes, sometimes it can be confronting or worrying because a lot of people don't understand it or know it. And often they can ask questions or say things that might actually come across as quite rude or nasty. 90% of the time, it's just pure ignorance. They say things or ask questions that might come across that way because they don't understand. They don't know that. Of course, you know, some people are just, you know, bad people and they want to be nasty, but 9 times out of 10, probably higher, people are actually pretty good and they're interested. They want to know. But when they come down and it might seem like they're attacking you, or they've got all these questions, you go, how do you not know that? That's such a stupid thing, you know? Oh, yep, I'm having a hypo, so no, don't hand me my insulin. That's a silly idea. They just don't know any better. And I think the more you speak with them, and I guess patience isn't what we're good at when we have got diabetes, having a hypo, I should say, it's not a positive, but yeah, I completely echo Georgie's sentiments there. That it can be quite tough sometimes to bridge that gap and confronting, but generally once they sort of understand it a bit better, those questions only come because they genuinely are interested. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, Georgie and Jack, I know you both have 2 separate engagements that you need to get to, so I'm going to say thank you to both of you, but before you go, very quickly, hold it up if you've got it next to you, or just tell us what's your favourite hypo treatment, just for fun. Georgie's got it right there.
I was just treating my hypo with sorbet.
Okay. Oh, good.
It was the closest thing in my fridge, and I've already had 2 today, and I was like, I can't do any more jelly snakes. So
fair enough.
With mine.
Good trick. Jack.
Chocolate by far. Chocolate or whatever I'm in the mood for. At the moment, it's peanut M&Ms. I crave peanut M&Ms, but I find it's a good chance for us to reward ourselves if we're disciplined with our diet and all those kinds of things. It's the one excuse we get to eat the bad food, isn't it? So enjoy it.
Yes, but there's no such thing as bad food. I would also like to point out, and I should have said this at the beginning and I'm saying it now, this is not medical advice. Nothing that we are saying here. You do not go out and buy any of the things that we're mentioning. I've got a packet of tubes here in front of me and a juice box and some glucose tabs. I'm over prepared. Don't run out and buy anything that we're mentioning. We're just talking about what works for us. Georgie and Jack, thank you. You can turn your cameras off and go and do what you need to do. And can I please ask, Cheryl, don't you go anywhere yet, because I've still got 1.5 million questions for you. David Barron, turn on your camera. And also Steph Underhill, please turn on yours. Bye-bye. See you later, Jack.
Thanks,
Hey, David, we're going to come and have a chat with you in a minute.
Thanks, Renza.
Thanks, Georgie. See you later. Bye, Jack. Bye, Georgie. Cheryl, we'll come back to our new people in a minute. But Cheryl, just before I say thank you to you, can I just ask tips and tricks? Have you got any really very nifty tricks about hypoglycemia that you would like to share with people, even if it's more about, you know, how people are feeling about having hypos?
Look, all I would say is that hypos sometimes are unavoidable. Yeah. Sometimes with planning, if you know there's going to be a situation that might sort of potentiate a hypo, if you can be prepared, that's helpful. Although I can tell you, sitting here, I have absolutely 0 things right near me that I could use to treat a hypo if I had one. So there you go. It's a very bad example I'm setting. I have coffee that's got a bit of caffeine that might stimulate my liver a little bit. But I think be prepared is a great thing. And particularly if you're going out somewhere, do carry something on you that you can use to treat a hypo. Yeah. Particularly if you're, going out to exercise or whatever, have something on you. And I'd also stress when you're driving, the number of people that I sometimes have say to me, somebody went crooked me because I pulled up in the disabled car park to run inside and buy something because I was hypo. How rude were they? And I'm thinking, well, let's go with what actually was the sequence of events that maybe got people upset. Yeah. And number one would be, why didn't you have something in the car with you? And I know there are silly things to carry in the car. I've had tubes that have all melted into one big glob, and then the hypo got to chew around the edges. Warm juice boxes don't taste so good either. But it's good to have something with you to be prepared, and don't be ashamed, because it's normal. Sometimes you do get embarrassed. I know when I'm at work, because I work with a bunch of doctors and nurses and stuff, and you know, if you're reading a paper and you've read the same paragraph 6 times,
Yeah.
and you think, gee, this sounds familiar, and then you realise everybody else thinks you're nuts because you're reading the same thing over. But it's a part of my life, and people who know me know that if I realise I'm hypo, you know, I'll just go, oh, shit, am I allowed to say shit? Probably not.
Probably
But anyway,
not,
I've said
but
it
we're
now.
done now.
You know,
We'll
I
bleep
need to
you
go
out.
eat something because I'm hypo.
Yeah.
You know, it's just normal. I think you've got to normalise it, because for
Yes.
us, you know, if we live with type 1 diabetes, it is a normal part of our life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why these conversations are so important. But Cheryl, if you wouldn't mind just turning off your camera, I will bring you back later on. And Freya is with us. And Freya, if you could turn yours on and join us. But and while Freya's doing that, welcome to David and to Steph. I'm going to start with you, Steph. How are you? Hi, Freya. We'll come to you in a minute. Steph, tell us about yourself, please. How are you tonight?
Good, thank you. Sorry if you can hear my dog.
That's fine.
In the background. Yeah, I'm really good. I'll tell you a bit about myself. I was diagnosed when I was 19, so I've had type 1 diabetes for 9 years now. It's going to be my 10-year anniversary next year, so that's exciting. I'll have to have some cake.
Definitely celebration. Yeah.
Don't know why that's like, I have cake every day. But yes, I had a baby earlier this year, so he's nearly 1. He'll be 1 in January, and that's that's been a crazy ride, pregnancy and diabetes as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. David, it's so great to see you here. Tell us about you, please. I do like your t-shirt.
Thank you. One of my own design.
Yes.
Let's see. I've had type 1 diabetes since I was 14. So I was at high school. That was more than 38 years ago. So I've had many hypos over the years. I've worked in all sorts of areas. I've worked as a software engineer. I've worked as a professional photographer, taking people to Antarctica, places like that. So hypos don't stop me going anywhere. I always have some food with me.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was the label hypo, because it means different things to different people.
It does. Let's talk about that in a minute. I want to introduce Freya and then let's pick up on that. So thank you so much for joining us. And David, I also want to talk about what happens when you suddenly, or whatever, start to have fewer hypos than you used to, because I know that may be, we're not going to be talking about why that might have happened, but just how that changes things. So I'm actually giving you a little bit of a hint about some of the things we're going to talk about. Sure. Freya, welcome. It's so good to see you again. How are you tonight?
I'm really good, thanks. Hi.
Tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm Freya Goldston. I'm 11 years old and I was diagnosed when I was 11 months old. So it'll nearly be 11 years now I've had it.
Yep.
And yeah, I've been living with it all my life, basically. It's just became a normal part of my life, really. And hypos obviously just come along with that. So yeah.
Yeah. And can I ask you, Freya, well, I've got you and we're focusing on you for a moment. Tell us how do you deal with hypos with your friends? Do they know what it's all about? Do they help out at any time, or do they know just to stay back because you've got it sorted?
Well, my friends know what it's about, and they know I have diabetes, and they're really helpful. They stay back in the classroom with me if I'm ever low. And sometimes my teacher will get my friends run downstairs if we need something to get from the fridge or anything. So it's really good to have supportive friends who are always there and they understand it. But next year I'm going to a new school for high school, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. Freya has actually joined us for other sessions as well. She's an absolute gem. We're thrilled to have you back. Steph, let's talk a little bit about hypos with a new baby. How has that been for you?
Oh my gosh, I've had some of my worst hypos in the weeks and months following birth, and sleep deprivation. So many things are going on with your body after you've had a baby that it's really hard to figure out, am I just exhausted from baby waking me up a billion times a night, or am I having a hypo? So I think actually since giving birth I've really become so much more anxious of hypos than I've ever been in my life.
Okay.
I've always been really good at feeling them coming on. Now I'm just like, I have no idea what's a hypo, what's stress and what's anxiety and what's sleep deprivation. So that's crazy. But also having to, you know, put my needs before my son's sometimes is really hard. You know, if I'm having a hypo and he's crying, you know, I have to treat my hypo and obviously not just leave him, but, you know, just try and manage it all. It's so overwhelming. And it's actually been really quite amazing that my husband's been able to work from home this year.
Yes.
One of the perks of COVID. So he's been around to kind of help out, which has been really helpful in those times.
We'll take those perks wherever we can. My baby, who turned 16, very rudely, I might add, I didn't approve of that last month. When I remember when she was new, people would come over and it was always in the bathroom that they finally had to say something, because there were little jars of jelly beans on every flat surface. So the point of was wherever I sat down, within arm's reach, there would be a jar of jelly beans for me. And that included having one on the back of the loo. And, you know, people would come over to our house, go to the bathroom and come out and say, why are they, okay, I just need to ask, you have jelly beans in your toilet. Did you know that? I'm like, yes, I do. Because those post-pregnancy hypos were something altogether new. David, let's talk about the word hypo and tell us what do you not use it? Are you telling us that you would prefer not to use it, or would you prefer that we said hypoglycemia or just low? Tell us what you would like us to do.
But I call them hypos. I've always called them hypos.
Yeah.
And for me, a hypo was something when my blood glucose went low.
Yep.
So I would start to feel a little bit wobbly. I'd scoff a juice or some sugar or something, and I'd come back up and keep going. And then talking to my doctor, he would say, have you had any hypos? And I said, oh yeah, I had 3 today. And he would say, oh, you needed assistance because you were unconscious 3 times. A hypo means different things to different people.
Yes.
Different people. So for me, a hypo is just, low blood glucose. But
Yeah.
for many people, especially medical professionals, it seems to be, a medical emergency.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it's quite different.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And this is something that Jane and I spoke about last week. We're both involved in a large project, research project that's being run out of Europe called Hypo Resolve. And one of the things that, so I'm on the patient advisory committee for that. And one of the things that we did at our first meeting was that we put out on Twitter and on Facebook, I think, do you have hypos? And, you know, or tell us your experience with hypos for people with diabetes. And we were really surprised at the number of people who said, I've had diabetes for 15 years, but I've never had a hypo. But what they meant is that they'd never had a hypo that needed assistance. So, but I'm the same as you, David. A low to me is something where I need to grab some sugar because I need to eat it right now because my blood sugar is low. It's not, what we term as a severe hypo that needs third-party assistance. So I get it. I understand.
Yeah, so whenever I'm talking to a doctor and they ask that question, it's always, hang on, what do you mean by hypo? So I can answer the question.
Yeah. Absolutely. Good. Freya, have there been any times where you've really not wanted to let people know that you're having a hypo?
Well, there definitely has been, but I have my phone for my CGM at school. And my mum will always usually be like, have to text me and tell me like, Freya, you need to go and get a lolly. You need to tell your teacher, because it's like, it can really affect me, because obviously when you're having a hypo, you don't really feel that good. And especially like during tests and stuff, I really hate pulling out and doing that.
Yeah.
But I have to tell someone, even though I don't really like doing that. And because otherwise it's like really affecting me. And but I don't really like doing that all the time.
Yeah, no, I understand. Absolutely. Steph, you mentioned that you felt more anxious this year about having hypos. Let's talk a little bit about that, if that's okay. What do you think, can you talk about that a little bit? Have you done anything to sort of address that?
Yeah, sure.
Ooh, hang on. Somebody's got their mic on. Could we just ask everyone to turn their mic off? Thank you. Sorry, Steph.
Yeah, that's okay.
How you address that?
Sure. I've always been really aware since being educated in the very beginning about diabetes. I was diagnosed that, having higher blood glucose has, negative long-term effects. So I've always been more scared of the highs, actually. and really on top of keeping it lower. But I think a few comments were made to me during pregnancy, health practitioners kind of flat out saying you can die from a hypo, and that just really kind of scared me. And I think just experiencing such extreme, I should mention as well, actually, I had a really bad hypo around 35 weeks pregnancy, and it wouldn't come back up. So it was one of those scary ones that I kept treating and treating and treating. I ate so much. I would have eaten over 100 grams of carbs, 200 grams of carbs, and ended up going to the hospital and vomiting everything up. And it turned out I had gastro. I was in hospital for 3 days because of that. Baby was fine. I was fine in the end, but it was just really scary experiencing that hypo that wouldn't respond to the way I was treating it. So I think since a range of things, comments, it's kind of got to me that having these lows, it's scary. It's hearing that other people have, sadly passed away from a low glucose event. It is scary. And I think it's really just led to me checking my blood sugar so much more often. At the first sign of, oh, am I feeling funny? I'll just check. And I'm checking a bunch of times, and it's really expensive, going through all the different tests and things. So
Yep. Absolutely. And I think one of the things is managing and understanding how we assess that risk and that fear, because fear of hypoglycemia is very real. We know that it is extremely rare that there are, things that happen that, all of the scary stories that we hear, but they do. And so putting that in perspective and making sure that, we get up the next morning and that we keep going even when we do have this anxiety, which is so understandable. That fear of hypo is very, very real for so many people.
Yeah. But I just wanted to add as well that, working with the team now to kind of get back on top of it. My endo recommended an app that helps me calculate my doses, which is great. And my diabetes educator also said, we need to stop having so many hypos, and it's okay to run high for a little bit, and we can treat the highs. But that's been great.
Absolutely.
To get them.
Yeah. I mean, finding that support and having teams around us who can do that is so, so important. Absolutely. David, let's talk about when you stop having quite as many hypos, because you've changed your treatment plan and it seems to work, and, you've got a team around you, or you haven't, whatever it might be. Has that changed how you felt about hypos?
I'm not sure. I was thinking about all the overall experience of hypos, because when I started out, my meter was this big brick.
Yes.
That if I opened it up and tested, it would make loud beeps. And it's not something I could subtly do down the back of the classroom, for example. So if I felt a little bit wobbly, I would just scoff a little bit of orange juice or something.
Yeah.
So I may have been running a little bit higher, bouncing a little bit higher than I should have been. I don't know. I wasn't monitoring that closely, but I always felt when I was going low. And then later on, technology got better, more portable. And I got to the stage that I could just subtly test my finger and see how I was going. Yeah. And then I always had quiet snacks with me. That was one of the tricks.
Quiet snacks.
Quiet snacks. Not in crinkly plastic wrappers.
I got it. Yeah.
And then I lived for a long time in injections and pumps. And I had hypos every now and then. I had overnight hypos. Sometimes I would wake up in a pool of sweat, or wake up and feel a little bit wobbly and get up and go down to the kitchen, have some food, come back to bed. This was normal. And then I now have a CGM, so it tells me when I'm starting to get low. Mm-hmm. So I very rarely get super low, because it starts buzzing at me, and then later on it gets louder when I'm getting lower and lower. So I can avoid those more often. And I'm getting less hypos overnight. It's very rare for me to get an overnight hypo these days.
Yeah.
And at first I thought I wasn't getting better sleep. But then one day my CGM was out, the transmitter was busted, and took me a day or so to get a replacement. And then that night I had an overnight hypo. And then I woke up in the morning, I was lying in bed, I was completely exhausted, no energy. And suddenly I remembered, oh, I remember this. This is what it used to be like.
Yeah.
So it's freeing to get rid of that. But I still think of a hypo just as something that's, oh, it's a short-term thing. I need to get some food into me and I can move on.
Yeah.
Jack was talking earlier about using the hypo treats as reward. And I used to have the little Turkish Delight snack size ones. They were I like Turkish Delight. They were my little reward. But now I've got to the stage that I have treats that are much smaller in terms of carb count, and they're just a bit of sugar to get me by. They're not really a reward. I save the reward for food that I can build into my diet plan.
Fair enough. Absolutely. And I think that's probably, that's really how I guess I think about it too. So Steph and David, thank you so much. I'm going to ask you in 1 second to turn off your cameras. Freya, I've still got a question for you, so don't go anywhere, please. But before I do, hypo treatment of choice. Steph, let's go with you first.
At the moment, my go-to is 2 marshmallows, because I'm so sick of jelly beans and so sick of juice. And they're really easy to eat and they're quiet, so I don't wake my husband up when I'm munching on marshmallows.
Good one. Thank you, Steph. And David?
Okay, I've got here, this is not mini M&Ms. This is a mini M&Ms container, but in fact, it holds glucose tablets.
Excellent.
So nice and quiet. Each one of those is 4 grams. I can just pop them out if I'm riding my bike or anything. I just pop 1 or 2 out and scoff them, and that's usually enough.
I'm surprised you didn't 3D print yourself a container with a label on it, so get on it, because that's the sort of thing that that you do.
This is food safe. My 3D printer is not food safe.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Thanks to the two of you. If you wouldn't mind turning off your cameras, and please join us, Tyson and Amira. But while I've still got you here, Freya, I wanted to ask you, have there been, sometimes we talk about hypos, and I often talk about, sometimes there's a funny side to hypos, and I'm wondering if there is any moment that you would like to share that either you know of someone, if you don't want it to be one of yours, just don't say their name, or you've had a hypo that's been a little bit embarrassing or a little bit funny. I'll put you on the spot.
I'm trying to think. I have lots of hypo stories.
Yeah, you can share one.
But I'm trying to think of one that's funny.
Oh. Well, I have put you on the spot. That was quite unfair of me.
Well, like, I've had lots of times at school where I've gone low, and there's lots of annoying times I've had like hypos and stuff. Like, we were doing surf skills, and it was like 3 days of surf skills, and every time we went there, I would be 2.9, and I'd have to sit out for the whole session.
Yeah.
So,
that's not fun.
No, that's not really fun.
But that's okay. That's okay. Good. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And I know that we're going to have a million comments from people saying that they're very grateful to have had you on here. So thank you so much. Please come back to our next one. We will always invite you back because you're just so delightful. So thank you. If you could turn off your camera, and Ash, can you join us, please, Ashley, Ricardo? But hello, Amira, and hello, Tyson. How are you both tonight, this afternoon? I'm going to start with you, Amira. Tell us about you.
My name's Amira. I'm a health professional. I'm a clinical optometrist. I've had type 1 diabetes for 28 years now. I'm also a Diabetes Australia ambassador and Keep Sight ambassador. That works really well with my own profession. I also have 2 boys, and my husband is also has type 1 diabetes. So within my profession, I consult, I lecture students, and a keynote speaker.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Tyson, it's nice to meet you. How are you today? Tell us about yourself.
I'm good, and you?
Yeah, I'm super well. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. Tell us about you and diabetes.
I've had it since I was 10 years old. I'm 32 now, so a little while, more than I can't remember not having it.
Yeah.
I'm a farmer, so it's definitely got its challenges.
Yeah.
Have diabetes with that.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us. And Ash, welcome. It's so great to see you. And I get to ask you questions for a change. Ash hosts with 2 other incredible women a podcast called Mama Beaties, and they have kindly asked me to be on it a few times now, and they've asked me questions. I get to ask you questions today, and I'm going to start with asking you to please tell us all about you.
So I am Ash, and I've had type 1 diabetes for nearly 9 years now. Was diagnosed when I was 22, so a little bit older, and was diagnosed when I was working for an endocrinologist. So that was fun. Yeah, a bit different. And I work with people with cancer, doing support groups. So I'm very interested in advocating for support for people, you know, peer support kind of things. That's kind of my area of interest with diabetes as well, and is setting up support. And that's how Mamabetes was born as well.
Wonderful, thank you. So Amira, I have a question for you, and I want to know about diabetes in your family, because you're not just dealing with your own hypos. You said your husband has type 1 diabetes as well. I need to ask this, have you ever both been hypo at the same time?
Yes, we have.
How does that turn out? Tell us about that.
Look, similar to you, Renzo, we do have jelly beans all over the place. Okay. We were lucky enough that our son was old enough, and I've had personal experiences where my two boys have actually literally saved my life, but they've known from a very young age, and we've explained the process behind it, and they've been really helpful and understanding in that way. And it's amazing how much kids can actually absorb and understand and be emotionally in tune with what's happening before you even explain to them. So yeah, we've been really lucky like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Tyson, you're a farmer. So tell us some of the challenges that you may have experienced. Have you had any hypos when you've kind of had a day out being a farmer, and how's that worked? Let's talk about that.
Like almost daily, but I wear the Freestyle Libre now.
Oh, yeah.
So I get a heads up because I got my phone on me always. And I have muesli bars in my pocket and a packet of snakes. Like I just got to have it on me. It's no choice. When you've got 400 cows in the yard, you can't, go home and muck around. You've got to have it on you. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess, that's often, we always talk about being prepared, but you're right. If I'm not prepared, I can always just, duck down to, there's probably a 7-Eleven or something on the corner. I work in the city and I live in the city, but it's a really different situation for you. So have you got a process as you're walking out the door in the morning that involves patting down and remembering what you need?
Like your car keys to hop in the car every day, you've got to have your phone, sugar and your insulin on you as well, because like the closest shop, for example, was 40k round trip for me. So
yeah,
no.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Now, Ash, let's talk a little bit about how hypos make you feel. Now, I'm not talking about feeling sweaty or feeling a bit woozy or feeling a bit shaky. I'm talking about how you feel emotionally about having hypos, perhaps after you've had a hypo or thinking about them. What goes through your head?
I think they make me feel very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
You feel very seen as well. Like you can't hide that you're having a hypo. So if you're in public when you have a hypo, and the first hypo I ever had actually was in public. It was while I was working, and a patient came into the waiting area, and it was my first hypo, and I just scoffed jelly beans like that. They were just shoveling into my mouth because I'd never felt this awful before. And he looked at me and commented, he said, "I've never seen anybody eat like that before." And so I felt incredibly seen, incredibly like not able to hide what was happening to me. Yeah. And then, some people say that they go into toilets to inject. I wasn't going into toilets to inject after that. I was going into toilets to eat hypo treatment or to have my hypo and to feel better, because I just didn't want to be that publicly visible anymore.
Yeah.
I guess, it's probably still like it's always the same if I'm out in public. At home, I feel very alone when I have them. It's like you kind of lose touch with who you are as a person for a very brief moment. And with my daughter now, very scared as well about how, if I'm holding her, if I'm trying to feed her, that I have to put her down in a safe place and then remember where that safe place is.
Yes.
There's bassinets and stuff everywhere. And which safe place did I put her in while I was hypo?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I completely understand. Now, I'm going to ask, we've got one person who hasn't joined us yet. So Frank, sorry, I'm just going to apologise because our balance is going to be off. We're going to have 5 people on for a minute. But Frank, turn on your camera because we'd love to see you. So if you wouldn't mind joining us, that would be great. Hi, Frank. How are
Oh,
you?
hi, yeah, good, thank you.
Frank's joining us from Perth. So tell us all about yourself, Frank.
So yeah, from Perth, I've had type 1 since for about 10 years, so since I was 17. Yeah, I'm currently an accounting student and I also work full time. Yeah, managing a warehouse, so that's quite an active sort of a job. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
We'll come back to you because I'm going to ask you about having that, active and quite physical job and what, your daily hypo kit, I guess, looks like, just in case. But so we'll come back to that. But Amira, I want to ask you the same question, I guess, that I asked Ash. How do hypos make you feel? How do they make you, and I'm talking about, how they make you feel emotionally rather than how they actually make you feel in terms of the physical side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's changed over the years. Being diagnosed at 9, certainly I used to feel really scared, especially that at that age, and coming from a family where, we didn't have the technology, there was no mobile phones, we didn't have CGM. So when it happened, I really felt isolated, and I was the first to be diagnosed with diabetes within our extended family. So, it was a learning curve for everyone, and there was certainly a stigma around what it actually meant culturally. So I was very scared. I think now as a mother, as a professional, I travel often alone, or I used to travel prior to COVID. I think I'll go back to the word that Ashley used, vulnerable. And, as a mother and as a health professional, you feel you have this, duty of care and responsibility, and suddenly you feel that, am I able to continue to do this right now in the situation you're in? Do I explain myself? Do I hold on to the symptoms for another 5 minutes while I finish my presentation? It's those things that sort of make you go, wow, like you think you're independent and you can, do anything and everything, but suddenly you go, you know what, vulnerable, I think is going to be the word of choice.
Yeah, I think I totally, I agree with that. And I know exactly, like when you said that, I know exactly what you mean by that. Yeah. Tyson, what about you? Is it something, do you find that with hypos you treat and go and then you're right? Or is it something that you come back to later on? At the end of the day, you start to think back to some of the things that have happened throughout the day.
Depends on the time of day. Like if I get a low in the middle of the night, my whole body will sit there and crave food. Like it'll just ache. I'll get a huge amount of butterflies, like when you're about to go up on stage and perform. Not that I do that, but if it's sort of to that feeling inside. But during the day, nothing's happening. I don't let anyone know that I'm being low or getting low. Because I just want to get on with it. I don't want the attention.
Yeah.
Of anyone. I want to keep getting on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Frank, you mentioned that you your job is quite physical. I've got a very noisy bird right outside my window right there, so I'm sorry about that noise.
Birds all over my backyard at the moment.
You've got what?
Birds all over my backyard at the moment.
It's the season. So tell us, how do you prep for the day? What have you got in your pocket at any time, just in case you have a low?
So yeah, always got a tube of glucose tabs in my pocket because I could be anywhere and everywhere. So yeah, I can just sort of treat and go. And I think technology is just amazing. I remember when a few years ago when I wasn't using technology, I'd sort of I'd have my little kit there with my meter and my hypo treatments. And I think technology is amazing because now I can have my stuff on me all the time. CGM on my phone, and I don't really have to stop at all.
Yeah, that makes things a heap easier, doesn't
it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Frank, I wanted to just mention, now you said glucose tabs, and because you did, I'm going to tell a story about you. Frank is a massive fan of glucose tabs. I have been at diabetes conferences with him where he has gone up to glucose tabs makers and told them that, and they have pretty much thrown boxes of them at him because that is his preferred hypo treatment of choice. So when you find something that works and that you like, stick with it. So I'm sorry I've just shared that story. Ash, I want to talk to you though about, because we might have some people watching who are either new parents or they're thinking about having a baby. I mentioned, Steph and I were having a chat about this before, those, those post-pregnancy, new baby hypos. And I think I told this story on Mamabeaties where I, in my mum's group, mentioned how I would feed my baby on the floor because if I dropped her, she wouldn't have far to roll. And my mum's group, all the mums in my mum's group were absolutely horrified because I wanted this lady who kept feeding her baby. But it was because of hypos, of course. I was worried that if I had a low, and those breastfeeding hypos were something else. Have you found that there are any situations in particular that you really need to be very, very mindful of and thinking about what your blood sugar is doing at every minute of the day? Or is there, is there anything in particular?
No, yeah, feeding is definitely a big one because it uses so much energy. So I actually took your hint and I feed her a lot side lying or with a breastfeeding pillow, kind of cushioning her so that if I do have a low, she literally can't drop anywhere.
Yeah.
But and as I said, we have areas all over the house where I can put her. So if I'm, if you're walking around at 3 a.m. doing the shh thing for 20 minutes straight, then you've got to have somewhere to put her when after 20 minutes of walking up and down you're low. So there's places everywhere. So
okay. All right, absolutely.
They are intense, those hypos.
Yeah, no, they really are. The next question I wanted to ask each of you, and then we're going to bring back anybody who still is here, and I've got a last question for everyone. But Amira, I wanted to ask, did hypos change for you? Like how did hypos change? I know that for me, they've certainly changed over those 22 years. Feeling the symptoms or symptoms changing or how you felt about them, what can you share about that?
Yeah, so because I've had it for so long, I remember early on I would feel it, even before it was, by the books formally, labelled a hypo, if I can say that. But I certainly had the symptoms quite early. The tingling was always an obvious one for me. The shakiness and feeling like jelly legs. And with time, though, there was resistance and there was, you didn't get the symptoms. My changing point was when I was at a 3-hour sale and I just thought, I'll just buy this last thing. Yeah. And the next thing I know that there's a crowd around me. Little did I know that at that time my mother was looking for me, my younger sister who was maybe 4 then. She would see me quite easily. Oh, she's there in front of us. And because I was at her line of sight on the floor, whereas mum couldn't see where I was, that was a big wake-up call for me to maybe focus on my symptoms and really hone in on them. So certainly the symptoms being a lot less obvious. And now I find that with the symptoms, I switch or flip into after treating the hypo, I do get, the shivers, the cold shivers. Suddenly you want a blanket or something to keep you warm because you've sweated it all out. So they have changed over time, and I just mentally have to adjust as time goes by. I don't think you've got a blanket rule of this is what exactly happens every single time. Yeah.
And what about for you, Tyson? Have you noticed that hypos have changed, or have you been lucky and they've always been the same and you know what's coming, or are they different?
Oh, they're always pretty similar, from what I remember. But if I'm reading a book and I can't read the second word of in the page, that's a big telltale for me. The tingless, the jelly legs, the lightheadedness, the fact that I can't do a simple task. Those are the telltale signs for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what about you, Frank? How have you found hypos have changed in the time that you've had?
I guess the more attention I've paid to my diabetes, the less sort of severe hypos that I have. So I don't have so many anymore where I really have to sit down and I'll be sweating and shaking.
Yep, absolutely. And what about for you, Ash? Have they changed? And I mean, I know pregnancy and having a newborn obviously does change them, but have your symptoms changed?
Yeah, I think, at the start, it's that kind of all-consuming feeling with the hypo where you're absolutely hungry. You'll eat anything. I remember looking at cars and thinking, that looks delicious, because like, you just want to eat anything. But now it's more like a muted, like the world becomes more muted. Like everything's just that little bit duller, that little bit softer, like I'm hearing through a bubble or something, whereas it used to be just this consuming feeling of like shaking and not able to concentrate. And so they're more manageable, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, David, Steph, and Cheryl, I think you're still there if you'd like to join us. I don't think anybody else still is. I think Freya's gone. Thank you. So I'm just going to wrap up. I am going to think about this, and then I come back to you all, and you're going to tell me in one word how you would describe hypos. David, you're a bit ahead of this because you've done some campaigns for us around this recently, but if everybody could think up one word to describe, and people watching from home share as well. But I just would like to remind everybody that this is the Lowdown campaign, and you can find out all the information about it at thelowdown.org.au. Diabetes Australia has run this campaign. This is the second year that we've done it. This is the Lowdown 2.0. And the whole idea behind it really is to get people talking about hypoglycemia. We want to reduce the stigma of hypos. We want to normalise discussions around it. We want people to realise that they are not alone. One of the really wonderful things that came out of last year's campaign was just that. We had people saying that they felt so isolated because they just had never really spoken about how they felt about hypos. This year, Diabetes Australia is focused on mental health and diabetes. Our National Diabetes Week campaign was Heads Up on Diabetes, and we really wanted to shine a light on just the mental health aspects of hypoglycemia during the campaign this year, and that is what we have done. If you'd like to get involved and also go into the draw to win a $250 voucher, you can share a video or a photo explaining what hypos are like for you, or a word describing them, and make sure that you use the hashtag hyposhappen so that we can enter you into the draw. Okay. All right, team, one word that describes hypos. And I'm not going to say my word because it's a swear word and I'm not allowed to swear on Facebook. So, Tyson, only because you're the first person on my screen right now, how would you describe hypos?
Inconvenient.
Yes. Very good one. Steph. Oh, Steph, you've also done some campaign stuff for us. So, yeah, you can use one of your words that we've got photos of you all over our socials if you'd like. Or you're on mute. You need to turn your mic on.
Embarrassing. I'd also like to use a swear word, but I won't. So I'll say disappointing. They're disappointing.
Yeah, I get that. I understand. Yep. Amira.
This is an interesting one, but bear with me. Roller coaster.
Get it. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Look at us all sitting here going, yeah, we know. All right, Ash, your turn.
Lonely.
Oh, yeah. I get it. Absolutely. Hopefully we'll feel less lonely though, knowing that, you know, we've got like a Brady Bunch screen of other people who know what's going on. Frank, what do you think?
I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna say more than twice a week.
More than twice a week. Okay. And I want to know why you're telling us that, because this is a really interesting.
Because every time I go into my endo's office or my doctor's office, how many hypos are you having a week? And 2 apparently is the gold standard.
Are you an overachiever, Frank? Are you having?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Yep. Get it. I understand. Yeah, I find putting numbers around anything to do with diabetes is just so frustrating, because it would work if there was a rule book and it was all a really lovely little condition that we could pigeonhole, and it's diabetes. So I get it. Thank you for saying that. David, you're next. What would you like to say?
Well, one of the words I used in the campaign was wobbly.
Yeah.
Because it's this picture in the background is actually of me having a hypo while trekking in New Zealand, and I just had to keep walking and have some food and then just keep going. But you feel wobbly in the moment. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good one. Cheryl, what's your word?
Oh, yeah, I'm not allowed to swear, so I'll save that one and say annoying.
Yep, annoying. I totally agree. You know, hypos happen, they do. Then they are every single one of those words that you have shared and more. And I'm sure that we will have lots of other, in fact, I'm just having a quick look and I'm seeing some very colourful language as well, which is fine. And absolutely no one's tone policing anybody. If they're the words that you want to use, absolutely. Look, I want to say thank you to everybody who joined us here today. A special thanks to Amira, to Tyson, Ashley, Frank, Steph, David, Cheryl, also to Freya and to Jack and to Georgie. I think that's everybody. I think I've got everyone there. Thank you so much for being part of this for us. To everybody who was watching at home, thank you. We hope that just having these conversations are helping, and that they are helping people to understand that you're not alone, that there are other people who understand, and that actually this is something that you really can be speaking with your healthcare team about. And if you're not sure how to do that, we can help you with that at Diabetes Australia. Do have a look at our website. The lowdown.org.au has got lots of information on there. We will keep this conversation going. It's not done. You can share the video. It will make it on our Facebook page, and you can share it on yours or on Twitter or on Insta or wherever you like to share things. And let's keep this conversation going. Hypos happen, they really do, and we need to talk about them. So thank you very, very much to everybody. And Emily is going to end the broadcast, so we'll say goodbye. See you later.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Ta-da.